The Talas River is not famous. It's a quiet stretch of water flowing through the borderlands of Central Asia. If you visited today, you'd see grass. You might see sheep. What you wouldn't see is the place where two superpowers broke each other in 751. This forgotten valley hosted the only recorded battle between Imperial China and the Arab Caliphate. At the time, everyone thought it was just another border war. They were wrong. This battle decided how knowledge would spread, how books would be made, and why you are not writing on animal skin right now. This is the story of a broken promise, a betrayal in the dust, and how one battle quietly changed the world. In the middle of the 8th century, Central Asia was crowded with trade routes, crowded with ambition, and crowded with empires slowly moving toward each other like two slow-motion trains. To the east was the Tang Dynasty, China's golden age, rich, powerful, confident. Their armies had marched west to protect the Silk Road, the highways of the ancient world. To the west was the Abbasid Caliphate, a brand new empire, fresh from revolution, hungry for influence, eager to prove they belonged among the great powers. Between them sat dozens of small kingdoms, and like all small kingdoms stuck between giants, they had problems. In 750, two of them, Fergana and Chach, had a border dispute, which back then was basically a hobby for local kings. Some people collected stamps, they collected wars. The king of Fergana decided he was losing, so he called his boss, the Tang Emperor, and asked for help. The emperor sent his best problem solver, General Gao Xianji. Gao was brilliant, ambitious, and famous for leading armies across mountains that most people refused to even look at. When he arrived in Chach, he offered the local ruler a peace treaty. The king was relieved. He opened his gates, lowered his defenses. This turned out to be a very poor life choice. Gao had no interest in peace. He wanted gold, jewels, and horses. He arrested the king, looted the city, and sent the ruler back to China, where he was executed. Gao forgot one detail. The king's son escaped. The prince fled west, straight into the arms of the Abbasid governor of Khorasan. And he didn't come asking for trade. He came asking for revenge. The Abbasids saw an opportunity, a perfect excuse to move east. Central Asia mattered because of one thing, the Silk Road. Not one road, but a web of trade routes that connected China to the Mediterranean. Whoever controlled its cities controlled the world's economy, and in 751, two empires wanted control. The Tang Dynasty was at its peak. Poets, engineers, bureaucrats, they had everything, and they expected to keep it that way. The Abbasids were the newcomers, young, energetic, masters of cavalry warfare. They wanted a place at the table. There was also a third power watching everything, the Tibetan Empire. And these were not peaceful monks with bells. They were a serious military force. They hated the Tang. So when the Abbasids moved east, the Tibetans joined them. Then there were the wild cards, the Karluk Turks, mercenaries, horsemen, professionals. They didn't care who ruled. They cared who paid and who looked like they were going to win. This would matter later. A lot. Gao Xianji gathered his forces, about 30,000 men. Only a third were Chinese soldiers. The rest were allies, mostly Karluk Turks and troops from local kingdoms. They marched across mountains, across deserts, across exhaustion. By the time they reached the Talas River in July, they were already worn down. Waiting for them was the Abbasid army, led by General Ziyad ibn Saleh. Ziyad was calm, experienced, fighting close to home. His army was bigger and better positioned. The two forces stared at each other across the river. East met west, Chinese soldiers in lamellar armor holding powerful crossbows, Arab cavalry in mail armor gripping long lances. For 3 days, the battle went nowhere. The Tang crossbows were deadly. The Abbasid charges were relentless. Both sides fought, pulled back at night, then did it again at dawn. a brutal rhythm of exhaustion. Then, on the fourth day, everything changed. The Karluk Turks had been watching. They saw the Tang struggling, they saw the Abbasids gathering cavalry on the flanks, and they made a decision. In the middle of the fighting, they switched sides. History calls this changing cloaks. In real life, it's called stabbing your employer in the back. Suddenly, Tang soldiers were being attacked from behind. At the same moment, Ziyad launched a full assault from the front. Imagine being a Tang infantryman. 5 days of fighting, no sleep, little food. Then your allies start shooting you, and the biggest cavalry charge you've ever seen comes straight at your face. The Tang army collapsed. The shield wall shattered. Order became panic. Panic became slaughter. Gao Xianzhi tried to keep fighting. His lieutenant had to physically drag him away. Out of 30,000 men, fewer than 2,000 escaped. In a single afternoon, China's expansion into Central Asia ended. Normally, that's where history stops. Winner wins, loser loses. Everyone goes home. But this story was just getting started. The Abbasids gathered their prisoners and took them to Samarkand. Among them was a man named Du Huan, not a general, not a hero, a writer, and also something else. Some of the prisoners weren't just soldiers, they were papermakers. At this time, the West didn't have real paper. They used papyrus, or parchment made from animal skin. Papyrus cracked. Parchment was insanely expensive. But the Chinese knew a secret. They could take old rags, fishing nets, and tree bark, and turn them into smooth, light sheets. Paper. The Abbasids were fascinated. They didn't just keep the prisoners, they asked them to teach. Soon, paper mills appeared in Samarkand, then Baghdad, then Damascus, and suddenly, knowledge became cheap. Books multiplied, science spread, religion traveled faster than ever before. The Abbasids didn't just win a battle, they won the future of information. Back in China, Gao Xianzhi returned in disgrace. 5 years later, he was executed. Then, something worse happened. A massive civil war called the Anlushan Rebellion exploded inside China. The Tang were forced to pull all their troops back east. They never returned to Central Asia. Over the next 2 centuries, the region slowly became Muslim, a cultural shift that still defines it today. And Du Huan? He spent 11 years traveling through the Abbasid world as a prisoner. He visited Baghdad, Africa, Persia. He eventually made it home by sea and wrote about everything he saw, one of the first Chinese windows into the Islamic world. The Abbasids never tried to invade China. China was too far away, too big. Instead, something strange happened. The enemies of 751 became allies. Just 5 years later, Abbasid soldiers were sent to help the Tang emperor fight rebels. History is funny like that. The Battle of Talas wasn't really a victory for Arabs or for Chinese. It was a victory for the book. If Gao had kept his promise, the battle might never have happened. If the Karluks had stayed loyal, the Tang might have won. If the Abbasids hadn't been curious, paper might have stayed locked inside China. But history isn't shaped by perfect people. It's shaped by ambition, fear, greed, and accidents. Because one general wanted diamonds, the world got libraries. Paper traveled from Samarkand to Baghdad, from Baghdad to Spain, from Spain to Europe. Eventually, it reached a man named Gutenberg, and the world changed again.